Hi, it's Alexis Hasselberger, time management and productivity coach. Have you ever heard of the lemme-justs? Like, let me just do this for 1 second. Well, I had a client and she coined this term, or maybe she didn't, but she coined it for me. I had never heard it before. But she said, I'm just getting blocked. I'm getting so distracted all day long. And I said, what are you getting distracted by so that we can try to work on it? And she said, it's just all these darn lemme-justs. Let me just check this email really quick. Let me just, file this report really quick. And by the end of the day, all I have done is these lemme-justs, and I haven't done anything that I have set out to do. And I said, this happens to everybody. And I love that you've coined this term, because when you said it, I immediately knew what you were talking about, because we all do this, right? Let me just do this real quick. Oh, I've got to write this report, but let me just check my email. And then what happens, the next hour goes by and we didn't actually write that report. All we did was get sucked into email. These little things show up all of the time. The let me just do this. Let me just do this. Let me just do this. Let me just take a shower before I leave the house. Oh, now I'm late, right? We have all of these things, and they they show up all the time for us, and they are really hard. And so I'm wondering, as I'm talking, do you feel like this happens to you, right? Do you have an attack of the lemme-justs? Your day might feel like lemme-justs, and you feel like, well, but they're all urgent. These things just come up. Or maybe, if I don't do it right now, I'm never going to do it, right? It's just going to be gone. I'm never going to do it. So I have to do it right now while I'm thinking about it. So if this happens to you, if you feel like on a regular basis, you set out to do some things, and in the end, you don't do those things because there's so many just little lemme-justs that show up, and you do those things instead, then I want to share with you a few ways that we can combat this problem, right? Because I think we all have it. And if you don't, then tell me your strategies, because I want to share those with other people as well. So when we are thinking about, all of these lemme-justs that just pop up, there are a few things that we can do to help combat this so that, we're not just letting the day happen to us. We are actually being proactive about our day. When the lemme-justs are, at our throat, the lemme-justs are running the day. It's not us, right? And we want the opposite. We want to move from the reactive to the proactive. And so what are some ways that we can do that? The first way that we can do this is to use a task system. And if you have been watching these videos on the regular, then you know maybe that I sound like a broken record right now, but having a place to put all of your tasks and your projects, all of the things that you have to do, whether they're for home or for work, having a single place and using this to prioritize the things that we have to do to plan for our day can really help us combat those lemme-justs. And the reason for this is this. If you have a plan and it's written down and everything is kind of in your system, then when these lemme-justs come in, you can actually compare it to something, right? So you can say, is this thing that's coming in, is it actually more important or less important than the things that I plan to do today, right? Or more important, or more urgent or less urgent. We have something to compare it to. And so that can help us push back when maybe this thing is just a squeaky wheel, right? Or maybe it's our own brain, right? Going, let me just check this email. If we have a plan, we can come back to that, right? We can gently refocus on what we're supposed to be doing, even when we find ourselves off doing something else. Now, another way that we can combat these in the moment is to just write them down, right? So sometimes it is just a little 2-minute thing. We are going to do it pretty soon. But if we stop what we're doing to do this thing, then we will lose time. And the reason for this is that studies show that when we get interrupted or distracted, even when we're doing it to ourselves, that it actually takes us about 23 minutes on average to refocus on what we're doing. So if we are interrupting ourselves with all these little lemme-justs, we are just hemorrhaging time all day long, right? It's just slipping through our grasp. So these things are going to pop up, and sometimes it does make sense to just do it right now because it's a small thing. But we're not going to do it right now. We're going to write it down. We're going to finish what it is that we're doing in the moment. And then when we have finished that thing, then we can go back to the lemme-just. And so the writing it down, it helps us to combat that feeling that if we don't do this thing right now, that it's never going to happen, right? Because we know it is, because we've written it down. Now, another thing that we can do, the last strategy that we can use to combat these lemme-justs and to get them to stop, ruining our day, ruining our productivity, is to batch process, right? Because a lot of these things, they are just the little things that come up. So specifically, let's talk about messaging. So emails, Slack, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, text messaging. We get a lot of messages all day long. And sometimes, often, we have notifications for these messages, right? And we see pings and dings, and it just makes us feel bonkers, right? It makes us feel like we're ping-ponging all over the place. And these things are often the lemme-justs, right? It's like, ooh, this Slack message came up. Let me just do this before I get down to my heads down project. Or, ooh, this email from my boss just came in. Let me deal with this before I can get my head in the game for something else. Instead of having those notifications off, are on, I'm going to ask you to turn them off. Just try it, right? If this seems scary, like you're not alone. Lots of people are scared by this. Just try to turn those notifications off and then instead batch process your messaging. So throughout the day, maybe depending on your job, you might need like a couple of times, maybe 2 times to process messaging. If you're thinking that sounds not doable, maybe you need 6 times to process your messaging. If you're processing your messaging 6 times within an 8-hour window of work, you're still getting back to people, every hour and 15 minutes or so, right? And so it actually isn't that long that it's taking to get back to someone. You're probably going to get back to them sooner, honestly. But batch process those things. And then when you are not processing email or messaging, close it out, right? Don't have the temptation there. Close it out. Close out the desktop apps, close out the tabs. Like if you're not in it, you're not in it. And then a lot of those lemme-justs will just kind of not be there, right? Because you're not seeing that little thing. You'll be able to process those messages at other times. Now, another thing that you can do if you get a lot of these is to batch process them together, right? So use batch processing to batch process them together. So if you have a lot of these things that just show up randomly throughout the day, it might be worth tracking, how much time am I devoting to these things and building that into your schedule, right? If you have about an hour's worth of lemme-justs that pop up all day long, and that they feel like things that actually absolutely do have to be done today, I mean, that's a thing to consider. Do they or don't they? But if it feels like, what, every single day I have a lot of work, maybe an hour's worth of work that shows up today, didn't know about it yesterday, but has to be done today, these little things, then maybe building some time into your schedule to just account for that, right? So building in a buffer of about an hour for those things and then batch processing to get them together. So maybe when you're writing them down, right, that's your new strategy. Instead of doing it right after the thing, maybe you have an hour in the afternoon that you have set aside to do all these little things that just show up, and you're going to batch process them, and that's going to be much more efficient. And then you're also building in that time to make it happen. So it doesn't feel like you're doing these things at the expense of the things that you had planned to do because you're actually planning for them. All right. Well, I would love to know, do the lemme-justs happen to you, right? Is it just me and my client, or, my many clients who have this issue, or does this happen to you sometimes as well? And what do you do? Do you have any strategies that you've used? Drop them in the comments. Or maybe you want to try one of these strategies, drop that in the comments as well. If you want more content like this every week, make sure to subscribe. And otherwise, I will see you here next time.
Yes, be sure to subscribe to the channel because it actually really helps us. And I think we're almost at 1,000. So if you could do it, it'd be really cool.